Hi everyone, and welcome back to Liz Sews. So today I thought I'd get started on drafting sort of like a block for a swimsuit slash bodysuit. I'm not presenting this so much as a tutorial because this is really speculative work on my behalf. You know, I've sort of understand the body and the shapes that the patterns need to be, and so I'm just going to be taking my measurements and sort of converting them into a flat draft pattern. So hopefully some of you might find this interesting or useful, but just know that it's not like a full-blown tutorial in the sense that you might have to do a little bit of legwork by yourself to sort of figure things out. So the first thing that I've done is taken a bunch of measurements. So I'm going to pop up a picture here to help you see all of those measurements. So I've taken the full bust, the underbust, the waist, my high hip, my low hip, my crotch depth, and my torso length. So for all of these measurements, those are going sort of around the body. I also took measurements going vertically in between those. So the distance between my shoulder and my full bust, and the distance between my full bust and my underbust and my waist and my high hip, my waist and my low hip, and then my crotch depth. I also divided these measurements if they were uneven front to back. So for my full bust, more of that measurement is in the front of the body than the back, which is what you expect since you have, bits protruding out in the front. So I've noted wherever those are different. And for me, I have a difference in my full bust measurement, and I have a difference in my high hip and low hip measurement from front to back. So it's important to know that when those are different so that you can put more material in the front or back of the garment based on that sort of need. So now I can start plotting these all down on my paper. I just have a line drawn now here at the bottom of my piece of paper, and you might not be able to see it, but I do have another line that is done at right angles to that, jutting out on this side over here. Let's see. I can put that there for now and then move it later. So this is what's going to act as my shoulder line, and for now I'm working on the front of the bodysuit. So this line here is going to be the center front of my bodysuit. It's what I'm going to eventually be cutting on the fold. So the first thing I need to plot down is like the distance between all of my different measurements. So as I had said, this line is the shoulder, so the next one I want to mark in is the distance between my shoulder and my upper bust measurement in the front. Of course, it'll be different front to back because you are going over the contours of your body. So from there, my full bust to my underbust is 2.5 inches different. I'm going to put another line in there. So that's my underbust. And then underbust to waist is 5 inches different. And then the distance from my waist to my high hip, so this line will be my high hip, and then high hip to low hip, and let's see, I have waist to crotch depth. I need to label these, so this is full bust, underbust, waist, high hip, low hip. Okay, I needed to go. So the next distance I have is waist to crotch depth. It's just easier to measure from the waist on this one. So that's going to be my crotch depth. And the last measurement I need is my full length of the front. So that one's taken from the shoulder all the way to the middle in between your legs. So now I'm just going to extend these lines a little bit so that I have more than enough space to work on. So all of these are the actual measurements you took from your body. You don't need to make any adjustments. on these sort of like horizontal lines, you want the actual measurement between like your bust and your full bust and stuff like that, because I'm going to draft this bodysuit in a way that I'm not accounting. I don't expect it to stretch vertically across my body. I want most of the stretch happening horizontally around my body, and that's because most of my fabrics are two-way stretch. So I'm going to stretch around and not up and down. Okay, so those are all of my like cardinal markings in there. And then the next thing I need to do is plot where my measurements are. So of course I have like full bust and underbust measurement, waist, and so forth and so forth. So for these measurements, so if you took the full circumference around your body and you notice that there was no difference front to back, so like for instance my waist, I have no difference on front to back, I would take that full circumference and divide it by 4, because we're working on a quarter of the body, right? So this is the fold line, so you're working on half of the front, so a quarter of your body. So if you have a full circumference, you divide it by 4, and if you have a circumference that's only like half, so like for instance on the full bust, my full bust measurement in the front is only half, so I only divide those by 2, because I'm really only working on a quarter of the body. Hope that makes sense. So, and then I'm going to apply my reduction factor. So in my case, my reduction factor, I'm going to go with 13% as my reduction factor, but my panty drafting block video has a lot of different reduction factors you can use based on the material you're using. That's just what I'm going to do for mine. So I just plopped that into an Excel spreadsheet, you know, all of my numbers, and then divided them either by 2 or 4 if they were full circumference or half circumferences, and then applied my reduction factor, and that's where I'm going to get all of these points. So first I'm going to mark in what I got for my full bust in the front. I'm just going to do a little tick mark there, and then my underbust in the front, and my waist, and my high hip, and my low hip. For now, I'm just going to connect all of those dots with a straight line, but with a pencil, and then I'll come back in later once I have more things fleshed out, and connect it with a curved line to make it something that looks more, you know, recognizable. Next, I'm going to work on my armholes here. So for this particular pattern, I'm going to draft it with the assumption that I'm going to put sleeves in it. And so for sleeves, I just measured against my body, and I said that if I wanted sleeves in the garment, then I wanted the armhole to start 2 inches above my underbust. So I'm just going to sketch in a little line there so that I know that's where I want my sleeves, my arm side to be. And I just did some quick measurements across my body to figure out, you know, like how wide I wanted my neckline to be. And I decided that I wanted the shoulders to be about 4.5 inches long. So I'm just going to go directly up from my full bust measurement. Yeah. And that's going to be sort of the start of my sleeve, my arm side, and I want it to be 4.5 inches long. So that's going to be where my neckline starts. So I'm just going to drop in my arm side using a curved ruler, wanting to make sure that I hit that mark that's like directly over my underbust measurement, and then ending where I had said I kind of wanted the arm side to end. And this one, I'm just doing it, eyeballing it based on my experience of what arm size look like. So there's no like master plan or anything with this. I'm just eyeballing it, and then I'm gonna sew this up to test, but so I think that's gonna be my arm side. And for this one, I want it to be a V-neck. So, and I want the V to end maybe 1.5 inches above my full bust. So I'm just going to connect those 2 points. Now that I have everything drawn in up there, I'm going to create my curve here, following all of those marks and making sure I'm hitting those marks along each horizontal plane. I'm not sure about this guy yet. I feel like this might need to be more that way. And then now I'm going to work on the bottom of my front piece. So moving this paper along here. So the first thing I need to do is sort of draw in this curve for my leg hole opening. So on the crotch depth, I wrote down that I wanted the gusset to be about 3 inches wide there, and since this is on the half, I'm going to make it 1.5 inches wide. So that's going to be my landing point for that gusset. And then in the very center in between my legs, I wanted the gusset about 2 inches wide. So that's that point there and there. So for making the leg hole openings, basically I'm just going to try to connect my high hip measure or my low hip measurement in with that gusset width. And I'm just going to use the curve on my ruler. Okay, if it extends a little bit above that hip line mark, and that looks good to me. So a lot of this, as I had said, is just speculation and going off of instincts of what I think looks about right. And then for here, I'm just going to connect it, these 2 points, with a nice curved line. So this is if I want the snap section to be like directly in between my legs, but I actually like setting my snaps up a little forward. I find it's a little bit easier to get to them, especially in bodysuits. So I am actually going to end this guy a little bit soon. I'm going to take away 1.5 inches from this front, right there. So I'm taking away from the front, and I'm going to add an extra 1/2 inch to the back length so that that seam where the crotch or where the snaps are is a little bit further forward in front of my body. So that is it for the front of the bodysuit, and that looks pretty good. So as I had said, I'm making this as if it is a V-neck bodysuit with sleeves, but let's say that you wanted something that was a little bit more like a tank top style for swimsuits. All of this information would still work down here. You just sort of need to change what you're doing above the bust line. So let's say if I wanted this to be like a tank style, I might draw a curved line like this to be, you know, that's the scoop of my neckline, measuring up from my full bust, you know, where I would like that neckline to hit. And then the same way you could just sort of drop in a curve. So if I only wanted like 1 inch wide on the straps, you could do something like this. So this would become your underarm and your neckline curve. So you can do sorts of different things with the neckline up here, still using the rest of the body the same. So now that the front is drafted, I think what I'm going to do is put a fresh piece of paper over top of this and start with my front draft to do my back. But my back, I'm going to be a little bit different because I want to do sort of a curved center back seam in mine. So I want to have a lot of shaping in the back so that it sits a little bit closer to the body. So hopefully that makes sense once I'm showing it to you. Okay, so I've copied over a fresh version of the front, which is what is down here without all those extra lines on it. So I can use that to start working on my back. So I do have a fresh piece of paper on top of my back. So like I had said, I'm going to do sort of a curved back seam. So I'm not going to use this like straight line anymore. So what I'm going to start with is sort of copying over this curve right here, because I want to keep it the same here and then extend my lines in on the center back seam. So I'm going to use the curve from my front of my pattern to sort of form the basis for my side seam in the back. I do know on the bust here, I think I'm gonna bring in this a little bit on my bust. So when I did my measurements, as I had said, my full bust in the back was going to be shorter. So I'm going to sketch in that curve, following pretty much what I have on the front block. So the reason why I deviated just a little bit on this full bust portion here is because rather than taking the width from the center, I'm going to take it from the side. So that's why this one's a little bit shorter there right at the full bust mark, but everything else should be the same. Now in terms of my distances, let's see, full bust to underbust was the same. Underbust to waist was the same in the back. Waist to high hip was the same. All this was the same. So the back length was different. So waist to back length, I said it was 16 inches. So measuring from my waist line, that means I want my back to be about here. And that's already taking into account those sort of inches that I borrowed or took from the front. So I took a couple inches away from the front and I'm gonna move them into the back. So that's one of the reasons why the back is longer, but also the back just tends to always be longer anyway. Now, doing this, so full bust is gonna still sit at that same line. My underbust was the same in the front and the back. So that's going to still sit on that same line. And my waist was the same in the front and the back. My high hip was different. So my high hip in the back, I'm going to start measuring from this point and measuring this way. And I expect that it will extend further than this sort of horizontal line. Just a little bit. That's where my high hip is. And then my low hip in the back, 8 and 7, it's same deal. Okay, so I did extend this line up here because I do want this to be sort of a full back item. I am going to copy over my arm side. I'm going to just do it the same front to back. I might change my mind after I sew this up, but for now I'm just going to do the arm side the same in the front and the back. So there the arm side is put into place and we can start working on this. So I did measure the shoulder distance in my back, and so that shoulder distance cut in half and then applied my reduction factor to it, and that is what I am getting right now for this. So that's good, I can keep that distance. I also measured the nape of my neck to my waist. So let's see, there's the waist to the nape of my neck. And that was 16.5 inches. So that's going to be where the nape of my neck is. And I think all that I need to do really is I know that if that's where the shoulder is connecting in the front, I just need to do a curve from that nape of the neckline up to the top of the shoulder like this. Then it will connect to the front of the bodysuit with a straight line there at the shoulder. So there is that. And the last thing we need to do is just sort of put in my curves down along here. So it's mostly straight for a lot of this. And then when we start getting into the bum region is where you're going to see some of that shaping. So just trying to move this down so you can see it a little better. So I'm going to use a hip curve for here. It's not a whole lot of shaping, but I think that should be enough just to get it looking a little bit shapelier in the back. I might curve this in a little, just so you get a little bit more of that shaping around. I'd always end up with pools of fabric in my center back, so I'm hoping that helps to fix it a little bit. This will be the same on both the front and the back. That crotch depth, it's a distance from the waist. And then for the back leg hole, so on the front leg hole here, you can see you do a nice curve like that. But on the back leg hole, I'm just going to do, not a straight line, I'm going to do a slightly bowed line out to there. And now I'm using my curved ruler to connect sort of that gusset piece down to the final length in the back. So that is the back all figured out. I hope you guys have enjoyed the look at how I started, flat drafting this pattern. I am going to go ahead and make up a mock-up of this, probably in some fabric that I don't care much about, just to make sure the fit's looking okay. And I will see everyone next time.